So Kenneth Olisa, Lord Lieutenant of Greater London, heading up the Greater London Lieutenancy. It's great to be speaking with you, and this is this conversation really came about because we are coming to the seventh year
End of an era.
in a way end of the era, but of the kind of great work of the Faith Council that you set up. But before we come to the work of the Faith Council, it'd be great if you just said something about how you got into all this in the first place. This sort of community work. We know you've done so much, and now you're in this position. But you know, why are you doing all this stuff?
Well, I think the answer to that question is quite simple, really. I think you can define humanity into one of two sets of people: those who get pleasure out of helping other people, and those who get pleasure out of harming other people. The good guys and the bad guys. I'm proud to say I count myself as a good guy, but I can remember that moment of that sort of epiphany. Really, it's when I was at school and I was in something in my school, rather bizarrely called the Old People's Welfare Committee. But basically, it was a little subset of the sixth form that did good works. And the good works that we did, that I can remember doing, was we decorated the flat of some chap who obviously had what we would now say neurological challenges. And three boys went in with paint and brushes and so on. None of us had ever decorated anything before, but this is the enthusiasm of youth. And there was this poor bloke who'd had his flat taken over by three thugs who painted everything nice magnolia colours and so on. And we transformed this miserable little hovel of a flat into something rather exciting. Anyway, so as far as we were concerned, we were painting walls. So we did it, we said goodbye to him, took 2 days, he said goodbye to us, and that was the end of it. And I'm sure our thoughts drifted onto the football and girls and all those other things. And about, 3 or 4 weeks later, I was walking down a very long road in Nottingham, my hometown, and I saw this chap called Frank coming towards me. I panic because I don't want to talk to this bloke. He was a weird bloke when etc. So I crossed the other side of the road, and he crossed the other side of the road, and I thought, I'm going to have to talk to him, and I don't know what to say because he was a very strange man. And he hugged me, and he said, "Thank you for decorating my flat." And I got a real rush of pleasure. I always remember that moment, and all my fears and worries and disinterest and so on washed away. And I think I've been pursuing that buzz ever since. Because I am, I think, one of the good guys, and I find it much more satisfying to help others and to do good than to take from them, or to absorb things or to ignore them. So it's been a long run habit of mine, and I've spent a lot of my time in charitable endeavours, seeking and I'm pleased to say receiving that rush frequently.
Well, that's really interesting to hear, and I'm sure it's something that a lot of people can relate to. That sense of getting something back from the work that you do. And why faith? I mean, just moving on to the sort of Faith Council. You set up, I think, 3 councils: heritage, occupation, and faith. But why faith?
Well, first of all, I did it as Lord Lieutenant, and my role as Lord Lieutenant, simply put, is to uphold the dignity of the Crown. So I take my lead from our dear late Queen and now the King, and see what they do, and then try to amplify their activities in London, the 32 boroughs of London, so 8 million people and counting. And when I first took over, I thought, well, my mission has got to be to build bridges. This is a wonderful, wonderful city, but there are still lots of gaps between communities and groups of people, and even individuals and the communities in which they exist. And I think, as we saw in COVID, actually we quite like in London to help each other, to worry about each other and so on. So I think I started with an open door here, but I look for ways to amplify what I would consider to be that human condition. And I thought, so what's the lens? What's the baseline? What's the foundation, perhaps, to do that? And my answer is, if you meet a stranger, you're at the airport and your plane's been delayed and you find yourself sitting in a cafe with a coffee, but at a table with a stranger because there aren't enough seats, and you start to talk about something, what do you talk about? Well, I can guarantee that the things you are most likely to talk about are your family, your heritage, your job, and your faith. Now, you may not talk about all of them, but you will talk about things chosen from that. And if you break that down from a community perspective, the 3 that matter the most to a community when a community talks to another community are heritage, work, occupation, and faith. So I set up 3 councils, one for each, to look at ways of amplifying the work already being done by wonderful charities across the capital city in each of those areas. I've got a faith council, an occupation council, and a heritage council. The faith council has been remarkably successful. I shouldn't say this, but it has left the other 2 somewhat behind. They are catching up, I'm pleased to say. But with the support of David Dangor and his foundation in particular, we have really, really shaken things up in a very important way. And in these difficult times that we live in, it's a really, really important way. So, to answer your question, faith, because it's one of the 3 legs I think that people hold dear to themselves. Not everybody wants to talk about it. You sit in the airport, you may not discuss faith with a stranger, that because it can be difficult, but nevertheless it's there. And even if you don't have a faith, faith is still there. And I have an office to responsibility. Westminster Abbey as the High Bailiff, and I hear the Dean, for example, welcoming people of all faiths and none. But the and none means actually you're still in the same circle. It's just you don't have a particular faith. So faith is really important, and I think the proof of the pudding is in the work with your massively helpful support we've been able to demonstrate in London.
Well, thank you. I mean, the Faith and Belief Forum, I think, is really enjoyed and relished really the partnership with the lieutenancy and also with David Dangor and his foundation, as you mentioned. And faith, I think, has shown its colours in a way, particularly through the pandemic. And I think I don't know if you'd agree if there's a sort of stronger recognition really of the role that faith-based organisations play in society and in London's community now.
I think big time. And I think what's really interesting though is the faith-based organisations themselves, particularly ones that we work with in the context of the awards, are so busy getting on with the task that they've not really had time to think about whether they are alone, whether they're part of a greater movement. And what together we've been able to achieve is to create an environment where they meet. And it's slightly apocryphal now, because I've extended this story a little bit over the years, but there was a moment in one of our early events where I saw priests from 3 different denominations, 3 different faiths, all chattering away together. The apocryphal bit is I think it was a Catholic, a Buddhist and a Hindu, but I may have now got that slightly wrong. And it does sound a little bit like one of the beginnings of a joke, doesn't it? But it was anything but a joke. They were chattering away. And I think the opportunity for those 3 ever to meet it wasn't 0 before the council, but it was a low-level number opportunity. What you do is trying to make that happen. What we've done is amplify that. And at the other end of the spectrum was, I think the highlight for me was when we had the event at Westminster Abbey. And I recall now we had about 300 people from different small faith-based charities all chirruping away in this iconic faith-based building, Westminster Abbey, welcomed by the Dean of Westminster Abbey. So this wasn't just a meeting room, this was an amazing coming together. And the videos of that still lift my spirits. It was, and by doing that amplification, it means that better work, more impact is happening in London, which is what Building Bridges is about. And of course, it's what the monarchy stands for.
I think you mentioned Building Bridges. Of course, that is the name of your strategy for London, and I think you can see it, as you say, in action when you see events like the awards at Westminster Abbey and the other award ceremonies over the past 7 years, which have brought these diverse communities together and connected them and created an opportunity, as you say, where they wouldn't normally get that opportunity to connect with each other. And I would agree with you. That is so important and so fundamental to the work that we do as well. I have to just sort of ask you as well about a bit more about the Faith Council itself. Of course, David Dangor has been the chair, but there have been lots of other important people on that council. And I suppose I just wondered whether you had any comments on how it's kind of worked as a council. Have you had there's people on it, some of the kind of personalities on that council? Because I think that group itself has been really important. It's not just one person, but it's an important group of people, and I suppose touches on the importance of the representative deputy lieutenants that you have, one in each borough, and also the cadre of deputy lieutenants that you have, but their role.
Yeah, a couple of words, if I may, then about the lieutenancy. First of all, it's an ancient role. King Henry VIII introduced it to shift, I think, some of the power away from the sheriff, who was the monarch's representative in every county back then. It's always had a military basis, and so really until early in the 20th century, the Lord Lieutenant of a county would raise the militia. So if you think of the Lincolnshire Regiment, for example, it would have been raised by the Lord Lieutenant of Lincolnshire. So we've got these deep military roots, but these deep connections with the monarch and the crown, and therefore the fundamentals of the nation go back half a millennium now. And the way it works is in each county, there are 98 of us in the UK, in all 4 nations. In each county, the Lord Lieutenant will have a group of deputies, and you will recognise them because they have DL as their post-nominal. And in a small county, in the Highlands of Scotland, there might be 8 or 9 deputies. In a huge metropolis like London, I have 110 or so deputies. And they are distinguished people from within my county, the Greater London County, ceremonial county. They're distinguished people who commit to serving, well, they're my deputies, but serving the crown. And we look for different ways to deploy their skills. And they bring 2 things generally. They bring capabilities, but also luster to the lieutenancy, and therefore in support of the crown. So at one end of the spectrum, I was at the coronation, for example, in my various capacities, but I was there. At another end at that same end of the spectrum, I will be at every state visit if it's held in London, as opposed to Windsor. So when, for example, the South Korean president is arriving next month, and I should be there to receive, first of all, the King and Queen, and then to be presented by the King and Queen to the president, who will then meet the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary, etc., etc. So we're very much connected to the crowd whom we're devoted to supporting. My deputies then do the same things that I do. We hold investitures, we present honours to people, we visit hospices and schools and get the messages out about the values which bind the nation to the more powerful bridge building activity. And within that sort of big system is the Faith Council and the other 2 councils. And so the members of it are distinguished people who are deputy lieutenants, DLs. They are multi-faith, so we've got people across the faith spectrum. And one of the things that they have done is to visit mosques and synagogues and churches, and to hear the issues and so on that are being faced by those faith leaders. So there's a dialogue, and I know when I started the Faith Council, there was some pushback from within the lieutenancy. Faith is at the root of all conflicts in the world, and etc. Very tiresome arguments, but nevertheless, I had these arguments put to me, and my answer to that is no. That's first of all not true. Despots are at the root of all those things, and they may use faith as their excuse to be despots, but it's despotic behaviour. But much more importantly, even if you were right, the antidote is dialogue. And dialogue comes from people of different faiths, different grounds of belief coming together. Now, I'm preaching to the converted literally here, because this is your day job. But what's so satisfying is seeing people from different faiths discovering common ground and then doing good. And that's been very much the experience of the Faith Council and its members, who have been tireless in the work that they've done, not just in the awards, but more generally across the promotion of faith and its importance in society.
I would agree with you there. It's been great to accompany the Faith Council actually, and to go to the meetings that they have. I think they have 3 meetings a year.
Yep.
And each meeting is at a different place of worship. So I think you yourself came to the meeting at Bevis Marks.
That's right, Bevis Marks, yep.
Synagogue, to an Eastern Temple. So there are the different meetings in different places of faithful worship. So so that's been a really kind of there's been something educational there as well in terms of the work of the Faith Council and its members. And I would really agree with you about the work that they've put in and the achievements they've had. What has the impact been, do you think?
I think the biggest impact, without doubt, has been the surprise on the face of the people arriving at the award ceremonies to see how many other people are being thanked. And I see this often in other contexts. So, for example, I hold an investiture twice a year at the Tower of London for about 40 British Empire Medal recipients. And of course, if you've got an honour, you get a letter from somebody saying congratulations, and the investiture is going to be in this date and so on, and you have to worry about lots of things: what to wear, who you're going to take, how you're going to get there. And there's a lot of stress goes into those kinds of events. And then you arrive and discover that you're one of 40 people, all of whom have made a significant contribution to society. And by the time you leave an investiture, you're rocking and rolling, feeling revivified, really, re-energized in a lot of things about values and so on. And exactly the same is the case with the Faith and Belief Awards. People arrive, they're nervous, they know they're going to have to meet the Lord Lieutenant, whatever that is. They're going to be on a stage, a certificate. They're probably looking forward to getting a small check. Actually, not a particularly small check, but a check, 500 quid, which makes a big difference to the kinds of charities that we're talking about. But your focus is on arriving on time and coping. And they leave, and generally we've been able to offer them food and drink and so on at the end, so there's a chance to mingle. And you know this better than I do. People arrive cold, worried, nervous, and they leave rocking and rolling, having had a wonderful evening, and discovering that they're normal, that there are lots of people like them who've got the same challenges, the same objectives, and so on. They're not alone. And it's bridge building. I mean, that's what it is. It's bringing communities together. It's convening. It's what the monarch does and has always done. So I think that it isn't just the, well, actually I should add the extra bit, because they go in with a certificate, and I mentioned the check. But the certificate then is there in perpetuity. So those who were there will always remember that event. But other people will see when they come to visit the place that the charity is located, that they've been recognized for their work. Now, I don't want to be negative. It's not really in my nature. But the opportunity for people of faith to be recognized positively for their work is pretty slim. I mean, if I was to do a quick test to the people watching the video, think about 5 examples where people of faith have been thanked for their faith and the work that they've done because of their faith. It's actually quite hard to think of them. I think lots of criticisms, but it's very hard to think of thank you. Yet these people tirelessly work to help other people all of the time, without being not only without being thanked, but not expecting to be thanked. And what you've invented, what you've created, is a forum where they are spectacularly celebrated, and I that's wonderful, and it's perpetual. And there is a famous story, which is worth telling, because it's such a compliment to the work that you have done, with the help of the Lieutenancy, I concede, but really it is the Faith and Belief Forum which has done it. And my clerk called me one day and said, "Ken, later on today you're going to be getting a call from one of the Queen's assistant private secretaries." Now, I'm an Englishman. I'm born and brought up in this country. I went to school here, state school. I know that means I'm in trouble. Worse than that, I don't know why I'm in trouble. So I say, "Oh, really? Because I haven't spoken to old Tom for some time." "Oh, I wonder how he is. What is it about?" And my clerk said, "I don't know." Now, the trouble is, when my clerk doesn't know, that means I'm in really, really serious trouble, because I haven't even told him. It's so heinous. So all day I'm worrying about what this call is going to be about. And it came when I was on a bus. So I'm upstairs on a bus, and the phone rings, and I have to decide one of those quick executive decisions. Do I take the call and find out why I'm in trouble and certain death and all the rest of it? Or do I not take the call and compel him perhaps to leave a message, and I just postpone? Do you remember that moment when, well, maybe not in your life, but when they say, "Right, the 3 of you better come to the headmaster's office," and you hope it isn't you? It's one of those moments. Anyway, I take the call. I haven't got the guts to wait all day to find out what it was. And I'm on the top deck of this bus, booming my welcome to Tom. "Oh, gosh, I haven't spoken to you for ages. I do hope you're well." What was that event? I can't remember where we were now when we were last together. Anyway, eventually he managed to shut me up. And he said, "Ken, Her Majesty has a slot appeared in her diary in about 6 weeks' time, and she's minded to use it to hold a reception at Buckingham Palace for small faith-based charities. Do you think that's a good idea?" Now, do I think that's a good idea? I mean, it is a good idea, a priori, but it's a particularly good idea because I'm not in trouble. So I boom out, "Oh, gosh, what a wonderful idea." I go on for some time, many bus stops. The whole rest of the bus is looking at this weird man booming out his congratulations for such a great idea. And when I finished, the private secretary said, "Well, that's very helpful. I think we're going to proceed with it. By the way, the Archbishop of Canterbury thinks it's a good idea too." I said, "Well, could have done this much more quickly, couldn't we? Just actually, the Archbishop of Canterbury thinks it's okay. And then 6 weeks later, there was a reception at Buckingham Palace for about 200 nationwide small faith-based charities. And as the Queen said in the little pre-reception, just listen to them all chirruping. They were so happy to be there and to meet each other. And so we should do this more. You are doing it, it's your day job, but we should do this more. It only produces positive outcomes. The council and you together, your organisation together, have made a fundamental difference to the bridge building activities that I'm committed to in London, but therefore to the well-being of many, many communities. And we saw it in COVID especially. So well done.
Well, thank you, and well done you. And the endorsement from the king, not the Queen, but no, that the king now also is really important. And I would agree with you that there is few opportunities to shine a light, really, particularly on small faith-based organisations that are doing amazing work. And it's really important, that sort of affirmation at a time when faith can often be seen as a problem rather than a positive.
I think that is a problem of faith always, isn't it? It always can be seen. But I mentioned the despots. It's actually evil people who take it to their own ends. It isn't faith that's at fault. It's the people who choose to corrupt it. It is worth reminding ourselves that the king soon, as in days after his accession, invited the leaders of the major faiths in the country together for a meeting just to discuss the importance of faith in our nation. So yes, we're talking about something which is deep in the country, as opposed to a project of some slightly strange, archaic role, the Lord Lieutenancy in London.
Yes, indeed. And I'd be really interested to know how you're kind of looking ahead in a way to the work of the Faith Council and maybe other aspects of faith and society. But before that, just a kind of reflection on the local borough awards, because as well as this kind of pan-London awards we have, you've also been a great advocate of us talking to individual London boroughs to encourage them to put on their own awards. And we've done 4, I think, now. The last one was at Waltham Forest, which has been very successful. But that's been an interesting thought process, and it's been great to sort of hear you enthusiasm about that. But yes, why have you kind of been an advocate of that as well as the kind of pan-London awards?
Well, let's go back to what the problem is with faith, and it's the problem as expressed to me when I set up the Faith Council, which is faith is at the root of most of the world's problems, divisions, wars, etc., etc. To which you already heard my answer: no, despots are at the root of those things. Faith is not at the root. So that's an easy statement to make. But then when you take that down to the streets level, as it were, people are just getting on with their things. The parish council is doing this, the Sunday school is that, the synagogue thing. They're just getting on with it because it's part of their lives, and they're not thinking about the wider community issue. And the challenge there is that actually those negative lines become true because somebody sees here's an opportunity to essentially divide people rather than bring them together. I'm all about bringing us together. And so the reason it becomes so key to do it at the borough level is because what we're talking about, obviously by definition, only happens at the borough level. And if you have civic pride in a borough, then part of the reasons to be proud are seeing what your fellow citizens are doing to help other fellow citizens in whatever way it is, in need, whatever the circumstances. But civic pride is a very, very important part of our nation and of this great capital city. Once a year, we have a service at Westminster Abbey for all of the mayors, or if they're elected mayors, then their speakers, so that the apolitical civic leaders, number one civic citizen, come together for a service to celebrate essentially civic society. It's quite moving. You see, in fact, it's very moving. I shouldn't say quite. It's extremely moving. You see 32 people in various robes, each with a mace bearer carrying their mace, in the choir in Westminster Abbey, and there's a service, evensong, but there's a service where we think about the importance of civics, of community, of bringing things together. And most of them will have their chaplain with them as well, and the chaplain will be from whichever faith is appropriate for the mayor at the time. But again, it's in Westminster Abbey, so we're saying there's a national point, the Abbey, because remember the Abbey only answers to the monarch and to God. It's not part of the organised Anglican Church. So the Abbey is a special place, and we're doing it in the Abbey, but we're not saying, well, the Muslims can't come in, the Jews can't come in, everything. This is just for Anglicans. The Catholics can't come in. It's just for Anglicans. It's for everybody from a civic perspective, but it's still a faith-based thought process. So it's too easy to say that we shouldn't talk about faith, we shouldn't declare, it's a dangerous topic. Quite the opposite. Why can't I talk about what I believe in and why I believe in it with other people without fearing that it will offend them? It's not going to offend them because I don't believe in offending other people. So the civic dimension of a capital city is really, really important. But I'm pleased to see that the faith dimension of the civic dimension, double dimension it there, but the combination of those two things is being increasingly recognised within the boroughs. And then finally, if you are a small faith-based charity in Borough X, you need resources, you need support, you need helpers, and they're going to come from within the borough. And whether it's a local shopkeeper donating something, etc., but that's going to come at the borough level, and they'll do it for the borough, that civic pride point, rather than some huge grandiose objective like a Lord Lieutenant. So the borough level piece is key, and I'd like to think I have 3 years to go as Lord Lieutenant. I would hope that in this particular context, my legacy will be all of the boroughs in London have faith and belief awards of some sort, and it will last for a long time.
Well, we've got a way to go then, but we've got a few years to achieve it.
3.
3 years to achieve it. I've got some other statistics here in terms of you were talking about your legacy and this important work. But I believe that 991 community projects have been connected and celebrated since inception. So that's almost 1,000. 235 projects have been awarded so far. We've had 4 borough level celebrations in Barking, Dagenham, Barnet, Southwark, Waltham Forest. As you say, we could aspire, you aspire, and I think we do as well, to cover all the London boroughs. You've got 3 years left until you have to stand down in your current role. What do you want to achieve in those remaining 3 years? What's your hope and your vision for the next 3 years?
I think it's easy. Clearly, as we've just discussed, to get the whole concept to work at the borough level and to make sure it is linked to civic pride in the way that we're linking it to capital pride, and as the Queen did in that story I told, to national pride. So that's the easy bit in one sense. But if we do that, that's in a sense an objective, but the outcome from that will be that large numbers of people across London have actually on the ground understood and respected other large numbers of people in London who care about the same sorts of things. And I think we live in such a strange world. I'm a relatively old person now, so I've seen so many things change from when I was growing up. The local newspaper published in the morning and in the evening. So it's hard to imagine, isn't it, that a newspaper would do that at all. Very few people now buy paper newspapers. You get it online, social media, and the whole thing has changed. That in the sense of communication and of leadership and of messaging and so on, we've seen a decline in much organised religion apparently in the country. Although I think that is debatable, but certainly a decline in the Anglican Church attendances. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure we've necessarily seen a decline in faith overall, but I'm not sure that's ever been studied. But what I do know is the more people drift away from thinking about fundamental principles, fundamental values, and therefore each other, the less stable life becomes for everybody, the harder it becomes. That's the wrong direction of travel. So I'm hoping to do as much as I intend to do as much as I can in the remaining 3 years to build those bridges so that we don't, when I leave London as Lord Lieutenant, as it were, it's a more unified, tighter community than it was when I started. It was a pretty good one when I started, I have to say, but it's an even better one. And that faith, occupation, and heritage are those 3 important legs. And if I just drift away from faith for a moment into heritage, if I look at some of the negative things happening in our country at the moment, they're focusing on basically people's heritage. So whether we're arguing about asylum seekers or things happening in the Middle East or something, we're not seeing them as people, we're seeing there's something else. We're all people,
Mm.
and if we can get that understanding across, and faith is a large part to play, London will be a happier and safer place.
Well, 3 years to go. You've done amazing work, and we've been happy to be a part of that with you, Sir Kenneth, over the last 7. Um, and good luck to you in the next 3 years with those aspirations. And it's been great to talk to you. Thank you very much, Sir Kenneth Olisa, Lord Lieutenant of Greater London.
It's been my pleasure, and thank you for all that you and your organisation have done to make this possible. Thank you.